Welcome to Settlement Services Allies in Private Sponsorship. My name is Anush Newman, and I am the RSTP trainer for Southern Alberta, including Calgary. And this session is for the settlement workers who are wanting to learn more about the private sponsorship stream and how it works, so they are better prepared to answer those immediate questions that your clients asks you when they meet up with you about sponsoring their family members. We'll go over the module information and then we'll have a discussion after that. So this is just first to refresh your memory about what you had read, and the information that I'm going to share with you today kind of reinforces what you have read. First, before we start, we need to do a land acknowledgement. The RSTP main office is in Toronto, which is in Mississauga, Ontario, on a treaty number 13. And I am in Calgary, Alberta, which is covering the Treaty 7. And my colleague Mary, who is also here, who is the trainer for Edmonton, Alberta, she is on Treaty 6. So today we're going to talk about private sponsorship of refugees, a program that Canadian government has had in place for many years. Actually, it is the first country in the world that had developed this private sponsorship of refugees in order to assist the Canadians who are wanting to sponsor refugees from overseas. This model has been so successful that many other countries had come to Canada to learn about private sponsorship and replicate it in other countries, such as England and some Northern European countries. Today, we're going to summarize the Canadian Refugee Resettlement Program. So private sponsorship of refugees, what we call PSR, is a stream that is financed by community members, and the settlement supports provided to the newcomers are by the community, and the referral to the refugees are done through the IRCC, meaning IRCC has permitted certain number of people to be immigrating to Canada, and people here in Canada can select who they want to sponsor and bring them to Canada. And usually the refugees are known to the sponsors, either through friendship or relatives or distant kins. The next stream is blended visa office referred, we call BVOR. And this one is, the reason it's called blended is because the cost of the sponsorship is shared by a group, community, as well as the Canadian government, IRCC. The settlement support is provided by the community via a community settlement service provider. We call those resettlement agency. And they are also referred to IRCC by United Nations. And then our visa officers overseas have a list of those people who are eligible to be sponsored under the BVOR program. And they select names and offer those lists to RSTP, and we post the names of the people eligible to be sponsored under BVOR, and Canadians can go through that list and select the people they want to sponsor. A Canadian cannot say to the government, can you sponsor my relatives under BVOR? The names are already, the people have already been selected in advance, and the Canadians can choose from that list who they want to sponsor. And most of the time, the refugees are not known to the Canadians who are sponsoring them. The next category is the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Partnership, and this category provides the option for the Canadian potential sponsors to sponsor LGBTQ+ individuals. The financial support for this program is a joint responsibility between the IRCC and the sponsors. Additionally, the settlement provided completely by the sponsors, and these newcomers can access any of the SPOs in their local community, and it's free like every other newcomer. Additionally, the referral for this program comes either from UNHCR or the Rainbow Refugee Society. And usually the refugees are not known to the sponsors, and they're just selected from the list provided. Then we have Joint Assistance Sponsorship, JAS, and this one is financially supported by the Canadian government completely, 100%. And the settlement support is done by the government combined with the community, and they're referred by UNHCR, and the refugees are not known to the sponsors. This is very unique, a stream, because usually the people who come under JAS are people who have tremendous high needs, who have been extremely traumatized during the experiences they had as refugees. And some of them may not be refugees. We've seen JAS happen back in 2015, 2016, when Canadian government brought about 1,200 Yazidis. Those are the Kurdish people in northern Iraq who were being persecuted for their faith. And the Canadian government agreed to bring about 1,200 Yazidis under the JAS program. And the supports for them is longer than 1 year, sometimes 2 years, because of the needs that they have that be caused by the trauma they have experienced. And then we have government-assisted refugees, and we call those GARs. And this GAR group, again, are selected by the Canadian government. The financial support for the period of sponsorship after arrival is covered by the Canadian government through IRCC. However, the settlement support are also covered by the government through these resettlement services. I don't know what it is like in other communities across Canada. Here in Calgary, the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society has a contract with IRCC for resettlement of GAR. So they have a accommodation location for the people who arrive under the GAR and stay there for 3 weeks, and then they are moved into their permanent locations. And the agency supports them for 12 months. And the refugees are not known to the sponsors because there are no sponsors for them here. The government has selected them. Just like the BVOR, the Canadian people cannot say to the government, can you sponsor people I know under the GAR program? That doesn't happen. I get many phone calls from people saying, I understand there is a government-assisted refugee program. I have some relatives who are refugees. Can we ask the government to bring them under the GAR? No, they cannot be. They can be privately sponsored under the PSR program. So who can sponsor under the PSR program? We have several streams under the PSR program. The first one is sponsorship agreement holders, and we call them SAHs for short. So if I keep referring to SAHs, this is who I mean. Sponsorship agreement holders. These are incorporated organizations. When we say incorporated, they are not for-profit organization. They are NGOs, but they have to be registered with the government, of course, and have the status as a nonprofit organizations. They have entered into a contractual agreement with IRCC for a period of time. It used to be 3 years, and now it's 5 years. So every 5 years, they renew their contract with the government, and they're allowed to sponsor refugees under this agreement. And they also may have constituent groups or co-sponsors. For instance, I can go to one of the SAHs here and say, I need to sponsor my Iraqi relatives, and they are in this country. Can you sponsor? And I'll be a co-sponsor. So they can take co-sponsors. The next stream, this one I call the mystery stream because not too many people have heard of it, and they continuously confuse it with the sponsorship agreement holders. And it's called community sponsors. It's any organization or association, nonprofit, or business corporations, of course, who are in a good standing with Canada Revenue, who are located in the community where the refugees are expected to settle. And they are prepared to provide the financial support and the settlement supports for the duration of the sponsorship. Then the most popular sponsorship stream under the PSR program is Group of Five. And Alberta has the second highest number of Group of Five sponsorship outside of Ontario. It's a very, very popular program where 5 or more Canadian citizens who have registered Indian status can form a group and sponsor refugees. They must be at least 18 years of age, and they must be living in the community where the newcomer is expected to live. And they collectively agree to provide the financial support and settlement support. They cannot have any criminal record themselves, those sponsors, or any maintenance, child support, and things like that, outstanding situations or court cases. They cannot be part of the sponsorship group. Back in November 2024, IRCC decided to put these two programs, two streams on pause because of the tremendous number of applications in the system, and they're trying to kind of move some of those backlogs. So they put those two programs in a pause, but we're told that it's supposed to be reactivated come January of 2026, okay? So who are involved as key players, partners, and stakeholders in the private sponsorship of refugees? Of course, the government themselves, the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa, and we call them ROCO for short. This is where the application go initially for assessment. Then we have the visa offices abroad, and of course, us, the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, we're also involved by providing information, resources, and webinars to the Canadians who want to learn how to do private sponsorship. Along with us, RSTP, there is another entity called the SAW Association. They are there to provide supports to the sponsorship agreement holders. They hold a lot of sessions and webinars for them and provide supports to them as well. Of course, also involved is Canadian Council for Refugees. This is an advocate group that brings issues or concerns to the Canadian government about the situation and cases, whether it is overseas or crisis happening around the world, and the need for the Canadian government to step in and support. Of course, UNHCR, which, as we all know, is an international organization. And of course, who supports the refugee processing overseas is International Office for Migration. And they have a contract with our Canadian government where they will assist visa officers with travel and transportation, the medical exams portion of the sponsorship. The application process goes through several stages, and there is a very strong need to make sure that when application is intended to take place, that there is a pre-screening of the application in terms of making sure that the group who are sponsoring are eligible to sponsor and they meet the criteria, and the refugees that they're going to sponsor also meet eligibility criteria to be sponsored. Then the groups form whether they're going to sponsor via the SAW or Group of Five or community sponsor, and they form, and then they complete an application, meaning they fill the forms and ensure that all the supporting documents are there as well, and submit the application. Now the application is via a portal. And we at RSTP are very much involved. So if any of you are interested in learning how the applications are submitted via the portal, we have few YouTube short tutorial. So what would be pre-screening? Pre-screening of the refugees, they have to meet two criteria, eligibility and admissibility. So eligibility, first of all, they must be outside of their home country. We cannot sponsor people as refugees if they're still living in their home country. I get a lot of phone calls. Can you sponsor my family in Pakistan? Where are they right now? They're in Pakistan. Or especially with Afghanistan now. I need to sponsor my family there in Afghanistan. Well, you cannot. Our Canadian government cannot go into another country and take people out of there. In order for them to be identified as refugees, they have to be outside of their home country, not outside of their city or their residence or their community, but outside of their country. They must have refugee status determination to prove that they are refugees, and they may have the option to repatriate if they can. And sometimes they have the opportunity to integrate locally in the country that they sought asylum. Or they might have the opportunity to be resettled into a third country, such as Canada or other European countries. So this is the eligibility for the principal applicant and their family. Then they have to go through what we call admissibility criteria, meaning they have to go through medical exams to ensure that they don't have health issues that's going to prevent them from safely traveling to Canada. They also have to go through a criminal history. The Canadian government does a very, very intensive check on the history and the background of the people to make sure that they don't cause any threat to us Canadians. And they'll do a security check on them as well to make sure they don't have a criminal record or been involved in some nefarious activities. So that's the admissibility criteria that the refugees must meet before they can come to Canada as a sponsored refugees. Under the Canadian refugee classes, there are two categories that they must meet. One is the convention refugee abroad class. They must have well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, whether it's sexual orientation or gender issues or political opinion. And that was based on the 1951 Refugee Convention definition. The second component or the second category is country of asylum class. People are seriously and personally affected by civil war or armed conflict or suffered massive violations of human rights. And this is what we've seen, what had happened in Iraq and Syria, in Afghanistan, and now in Sudan. People are fleeing war and their lives are threatened. So they fit under this category of country of asylum class. And let me see, definition that looks at a larger country circumstances, and that's exactly, again, about the certain groups who may face persecution because of the circumstances, the situation in the country. Okay, so let's talk about durable solutions. Sometimes the refugees have durable solutions. One option that the refugees who had sought asylum in a neighboring country, they may choose to voluntarily repatriate back to their home country. They can go back. And we've seen this cases in Iraq and Syria, where once things stabilize, some people are going back to Syria, especially the ones in near countries, whether they've gone to Lebanon or Jordan or to other countries nearby, some have returned back to their home country. So that's one durable solution. The second durable solution that the refugees or asylum seekers might be able to exercise is the local integration, meaning the country that they sought asylum in temporarily are able to settle there permanently. The country who accepted them as asylum seekers will give them the ability to stay there and become citizens of the country and integrate in that country and remain there. And of course, the third option is resettlement in a third country. Some people may choose to go to other European countries or Australia, who can be included on the same application. The principal applicant is the person with the strongest case, meaning he or she has presented themselves to the authorities of the country of asylum or the UN office in that country and got confirmation that they have been confirmed as refugees and hold the status of either registered as a refugee or recognized as a refugee. And this person, the principal applicant, must meet both eligibility and admissibility criteria. Along with the principal applicant would be his or her spouse, because sometimes the principal applicant is a woman, the wife, or sometimes it's the man, the husband. So along with the principal applicant, his or her spouse or a partner will be included in the application. However, this person under this category will be considered a dependent and does not need to meet the eligibility criteria because they are dependent on the principal applicant who already gained the eligibility criteria. All they need to do is be accepted under the admissibility criteria. Along with the application, any children under the age of 22 but not married. So if the principal applicant has a daughter who is living with them, is married, and she's only 19 or 20 and has a kid or doesn't have a kid, is not considered part of the nucleus family. Nucleus family, according to the Canadian definition, it's a parent and their offspring who are under 22 at this point for the application. Should the principal applicant have an offspring, a child who is over 22 but has disabilities that had happened before they turned 22, and they're dependent on the principal applicant for financial support and protection and care, of course they have to prove that, then that offspring or the child over age of 22 can be included in the package with the principal applicant. But as I said, if they have children who are married, they cannot be part of the application. They must have a separate application and be eligible on their own merit. So let's look at the IRCC process. How does it work? The first process in IRCC, that approval goes through the ROCO. So applications must be approved by ROCO. ROCO is the office in Ottawa. And the second part of the process is that the eligible refugees must be approved by our visa officers overseas. So there are two phases. Phase one has to get approval in Ottawa, the application, and then the application goes to overseas and has to be approved overseas. So how does the in-Canada processing work? The application package is sent to ROCO in Ottawa, and in ROCO, the officers will evaluate the sponsoring group who are involved in the sponsorship to make sure that they meet the requirements to be able to sponsor refugees. And there's a whole bunch of requirements that they must go through. I'm pretty sure that will be in other modules, but right now we're just gonna stick with the fact that at Ottawa, they will evaluate the sponsoring group about their eligibility and ability to sponsor refugees. Then, if the ROCO officer decides, yes, this sponsoring group has proven through their documenting and supporting documents that they can sponsor and help the newcomers settle in Canada, they will send the application overseas. The process in Ottawa could take anywhere from a few months to a year, so there's no targeted time. Sometimes they say it takes less time, but sometimes it takes more time. They're trying to shorten that time as much as possible, but they have a very large inventory in Ottawa. They're trying to catch up. So application goes overseas. An overseas application, the officer will call the refugee or the principal applicant for interview and screening. They go over information with them, and during the interview, they ask a whole bunch of questions to make sure the answers that the refugees provide are not contradicting to the information on the application about the history of the refugee and their situation, their circumstances. If they pass that phase, then they are referred to go for a medical, criminal, and security check. And if they go through that and everything is clear, then our Canadian government will issue them a travel visa or travel document. Remember, these people are stateless at this point. They cannot travel without any documents, so the Canadian government issues them a one-time travel document so they can travel to Canada, discusses with them about their travel time and the travel expenses that they must pay once they come to Canada. They do not pay for the airfare at that time, the refugees, nor the sponsors pay for it at that time. The Canadian government covers that, but the refugees, once they arrive to Canada, after a certain time, they have to repay the Canadian government those loans. And if everything moves smoothly, the refugees who have been sponsored will arrive to Canada safely. I'm going to open for the floor for discussions. Great to hear that. That's wonderful. You as settlement workers are the front line. You're the ones who receive all these questions and inquiries, and sometimes people are desperate to find ways to have their families removed from the critical situations or threatening situations. And they come to the settlement workers because this is who they know. This is who they met when they first came, and they have a relationship with. And they ask you, I have a family, and is there a way to sponsor them? And the reason that we're offering these workshops, so this gives you enough information for you to share with the persons asking you some basic information as a starting place. There's a lot more things that they need to know, but at least you can guide them. You say, the first question you need to ask when somebody says to you, can I sponsor my relatives? Where are they now? Because if they say they're still in their home country, you can tell them right away, it is not possible to sponsor them. Rather than go through the whole process of explaining how sponsorship works and different streams and the costs, and then you find out they're still in their home country, they fled the city and they've gone to another part of the country, to somewhere where it's quiet and safer, but they're still in their home country and they cannot be sponsored. And then they feel completely deflated because they thought, oh yeah, we can bring them. You're telling me all this information. Half an hour later, you find out that no, they're not eligible. It's very disappointing. So it's very important that you as a settlement worker know the first eligibility criteria is, are they outside of their home country? If they are, next would be, are they registered with the UN? Do they have documentations there? Things like that. So this is a very good starting place. And if you have any questions or anything you want to share with the group about what you have learned, what was new for you, what was surprising information for you, our visa officers will get a list from the United Nations over there, wherever location they are. And depending on the family situation and the need for supports, if they're going to be picked for sponsorship, then they will put them in these different categories. For, let's say, for refugees who don't have many challenging issues, then they'll say, okay, these people, we can designate them as PSR, and they can be sponsored under private sponsorship refugees. Families who have a little bit more complicated, more vulnerability, large families, medical issues and concerns, they say, okay, this might be too heavy. We can kind of partner with the community, and IRCC will partly fund the sponsorship cost, and the community will fund the other part. So they kind of share the financial load. And then for groups that have been extremely traumatized, like let's say the Yazidis of Iraq, right? I don't know if many of you have heard, they were extremely persecuted by, at that time, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, I think it was called ISIS, because they had different religion, and they were considered infidels, so they were extremely traumatized, some serious cases was happening. So the government says, okay, this group of people, designate them as joint assistants because they are going to need a lot of support. And these people need to be settled in a country where they can't go back to Iraq anymore because of the situation. They lost their homes, their family members. There's still thousands of people are missing still. So we need to settle them in a country where it's safe for them. And they're going to need support for more than just 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on their circumstances. So based on their vulnerability and need for support, they categorize them there that way. And they have that list, and the Canadian government officers will choose people from those lists. There's over 70 million refugees and about 45 some million refugees that need to be resettled, because the rest may be able to go back or reintegrating wherever they're at. So we have a large number of displaced people. There's also within there internally displaced people who had escaped from the major cities, like let's say in Afghanistan, they left Kandahar or Jalalabad or forgot the name of the capital, Kabul. Kabul, okay? And they've gone to other provinces where it's kind of safer and quieter and calmer, but they're still inside their home country. They're internally displaced people. And a lot of families here thinking that, yeah, okay, they left their city because it's dangerous there. They've gone into southern part or somewhere else. Can we sponsor them? We can't, because no country has the authority to go to another country and take people from there against that government wish. It's not possible. Our Canadian government can only sponsor people who have left their home country. Those are inland claimants. There is a separate process for that. So at the airport, at the airport are people who come through the borders, walking across the border from the south. And as soon as they arrive at the immigration officer, they say, we're seeking asylum, we escaped because of this and this and this. They get a temporary paper issued to them, and they've got 30 days to present themselves to the IRCC office in that city and apply for asylum.
Okay.
They cannot just say at the airport and then walk away and not go to one of the offices and present themselves. And once they go to the IRCC office in the city, then they go through the process of assessment. That officer will decide whether to accept that request and then send them to another phase of the process. Or if that officer at that meeting says, well, I don't see you have a valid case for being inland claimant, you've got 30 days to leave the country. So they have to leave the country in 30 days. But most cases, they would kind of move on to the next phase and go through more assessment, and they get a what they call temporary permit until their request for resettling in Canada is processed. But that has nothing to do with refugee sponsorship. Well, I'm glad to hear that or see that you guys have gained all the information through the module, and that the presentation that I shared with you kind of reinforced what you covered in your module. So if you need more information, you can contact us and or visit our website as well. Or when we meet next week for module 2, please don't hesitate to ask me questions about this module as well. I'll be more than happy to answer.